What if the most powerful civilization in history didn't worship gods, but worshiped time itself? Stay with me, because once you see time the way they did, reality shifts. Keep watching, because this is a mythology. It's a different way of understanding existence. Most ancient civilizations built temples to sky gods, sun gods, war gods, fertility gods. They carved statues. They offered sacrifices. They prayed for protection, rain, victory, survival. But this civilization did something stranger. They built no statues of deities. They built clocks, not small mechanical devices like we imagine. Monumental structures aligned to the sun, moon, and stars with terrifying precision. Cities arranged like calendars. Temples that functioned as astronomical instruments. Entire landscapes carved into seasonal equations. They did not ask the heavens for mercy. They measured them. Archaeologists first noticed something unusual when studying the ruins scattered across a vast desert plateau. At first glance, the structures resembled ordinary step pyramids. But when mapped from above, their layout formed a perfect spiral. Not symbolic, mathematical. Each building corresponded to a specific astronomical cycle. Lunar phases, solar solstices, planetary returns. The spacing between structures wasn't aesthetic. It was interval. Time was their architecture. But here's the unsettling part. There are no inscriptions referencing gods demanding worship. Instead, inscriptions repeatedly reference the flow, the turning, and the measure. They didn't kneel to personalities in the sky. They aligned themselves to patterns. Imagine a civilization that believed time was not something you move through, but something that moved through you, a force more powerful than any deity, unstoppable, impartial, absolute. To them, time was not a background dimension. It was divine law. Their philosophy appears radical even by modern standards. They believed suffering did not come from angry gods. It came from resisting cycles. Prosperity came not from prayer, but from synchronization. Plant too early, you defy the measure. Build during the wrong phase, you invite collapse. Wage war out of rhythm, you guarantee defeat. They didn't sacrifice animals to appease fate. They sacrificed impatience. Excavated fragments suggest their leaders were not priests in the traditional sense. They were keepers of the interval. Astronomer-philosophers who tracked celestial motion obsessively, not for prediction alone, but for alignment, because alignment, to them, was salvation. Their capital city was engineered like a living clock. Streets angled precisely towards solstice sunrise. Central plazas designed so shadows would mark equinox transitions with razor accuracy. Underground chambers amplified echo delays to measure acoustic decay rates, possibly as primitive timekeeping calibration. And this wasn't primitive superstition. It was systemic. Residential districts rotated construction cycles every 7 years. Public ceremonies occurred only at mathematically determined convergence points between solar and lunar cycles. Even burial sites followed a temporal grid, bodies interred according to cosmic intervals, not social status. No king tombs larger than others. No golden statues. Just placement. Position in time mattered more than power in life. But why would a civilization replace gods with time? Because gods can be negotiated with. Time cannot. A god might forgive. A god might intervene. A god might show preference. Time shows none. It erodes mountains. It buries cities. It ends dynasties without emotion. And perhaps this civilization saw something others did not, that every empire before them collapsed not from divine wrath, but from temporal arrogance. They believed previous societies fell because they tried to dominate time instead of synchronize with it. So they reversed the hierarchy. Instead of building myths to explain randomness, they studied repetition. Instead of worshipping creators, they worshiped continuity. Their central doctrine, reconstructed from fragments, translates roughly as, all things are temporary except the pattern. The pattern, not the ruler, not the people, not the city. The pattern. This explains something chilling about their architecture. There are no unfinished buildings in the ruins, no signs of chaotic destruction, no mass graves. It's as if the civilization ended deliberately, and that is where the mystery deepens. Because time worshippers would not fear endings. They would schedule them. If you're starting to feel the weight of that idea, don't look away. Because the next layer of his civilization reveals something even more unsettling. They may have predicted their own disappearance and prepared for it. They may have predicted their own disappearance and prepared for it. And that changes everything. Stay with me, because what they built at the very end of their civilization wasn't a monument to power. It was a countdown. If this idea is bending your mind already, keep listening, because the deeper we go, the less this feels like ancient history, and the more it feels like a warning. Deep beneath the central plaza of their capital, archaeologists uncovered a circular subterranean chamber unlike anything else at the site. No decorations, no throne, no altar, just a perfectly smooth stone floor carved with concentric rings, each ring divided into precise segments. Each segment etched with microscopic markings that, under magnification, appear to correspond to astronomical intervals, lunar months, solar years, planetary conjunction cycles. At the center of the chamber stood a narrow vertical shaft open to the sky. At noon on the summer solstice, sunlight strikes the exact center point of the floor. But that isn't the remarkable part. The remarkable part is what happens over time. Every year, the angles shift by a fraction so small it will be invisible to the naked eye in a single lifetime. But over centuries, the beam drifts outward, touching different rings, different segments. It is a slow-moving hand of light, a cosmic clock that takes generations to complete a sweep. This was not built for individuals. It was built for centuries, which suggests something profound about their worldview. They were not obsessed with immediate outcomes. They thought in spans of time so large that personal ambition dissolved inside them. Imagine living in a culture where your greatest honor is not personal achievement, but contributing to a cycle you will never see completed. That level of temporal humility is almost incomprehensible to modern thinking, but it explains their social structure. There is no archaeological evidence of dynastic lineage carved into walls, no triumph reliefs, no propaganda celebrating rulers. Instead, inscriptions refer to leaders only by cycle designation, not King Arathos, but Steward of the Fifth Turning, not Queen Lumia, but Voice of the Seventh Interval. Identity was subordinate to time. A ruler did not reign because of divine right. They governed because the cycle required a steward. And when the cycle ended, so did their authority. There are records indicating leadership transitions occurred not due to death or revolt, but because an astronomical marker was reached. Imagine stepping down from power not because you are weak, but because the stars have completed their alignment. Power was temporary. The pattern was permanent. This framework eliminated something that has destabilized countless civilizations: ego. When leaders see themselves as instruments of time rather than masters of fate, corruption loses its foundation. You cannot hoard eternity. You cannot bribe the future. You cannot intimidate a solstice. But here's where the mystery deepens further. In the outer districts of the ruins, archaeologists found residential structures abandoned in orderly fashion. Tools placed neatly. Storage sealed. No evidence of panic. No signs of invasion. No mass casualties. It looks like departure. Planned departure. Carbon dating suggests the civilization did not collapse suddenly. Instead, population gradually declined over several decades. Fewer burials. Fewer new constructions. Eventually, silence. It is as if they reached a predetermined temporal threshold and chose to end. But why? Fragments of philosophical tablets offer a possible explanation. One passage translates roughly as, when the cycle completes, continuation becomes imbalance. Another reads, to remain beyond one's interval is to corrupt the pattern. This implies they believed civilizations, like seasons, have natural lifespans, and exceeding that lifespan disrupt the greater rhythm. Think about that. Most empires cling to survival at all costs. They expand, exploit, and exhaust resources in desperate attempts to extend dominance. This civilization may have done the opposite. They may have voluntarily dissolved to preserve balance. And that possibility is both beautiful and terrifying, because it suggests they believed existence was not about permanence. It was about participation. They did not strive to live forever. They aimed to exit correctly. Now imagine what kind of cultural mindset produces such a decision. Children raised not to dream of conquering history, but of harmonizing with it. Art created not to immortalize names, but to illustrate cycles. Education focused not on theology, but on astronomy and mathematics. Time was not an enemy. It was a teacher. Their festivals were not celebrations of God's birthdays or mythic victories. They were reenactments of celestial alignments. Entire populations would gather in plazas to watch shadows move across engraved lines, marking the transition from one interval to another. The moment itself was sacred, not because of who caused it, but because it occurred. And that is perhaps the most radical idea they left behind. Sacredness does not require personality. It requires pattern. Modern society often treats time as a resource to be spent, saved, optimized, killed. We rush it. We fear it. We attempt to outrun it. They revered it. They structured their entire moral system around synchronization. Crime, according to inscriptions, was described not as sin against a god, but as disruption of sequence. Punishments were restorative, aimed at reintegration into communal rhythm. Even warfare, when unavoidable, was timed meticulously. Historical fragments describe battles initiated only after specific celestial confirmations. If alignment was unfavorable, they would delay, even if strategically inconvenient. Victory achieved out of rhythm was considered unstable. Loss within rhythm was acceptable. This level of patience suggests extraordinary discipline. But then we find something even more unsettling. In the final layers of the Capitol's archive chamber, beneath the concentric rings, researchers discovered sealed stone containers. Inside were inscribed tablets, not historical records, but projections, charts extending thousands of years into the future. Predictions of eclipses, planetary transits, long-term solar shifts. Their calculations are astonishingly accurate, which raises an uncomfortable question. If they could model time so precisely, did they foresee not only their end, but ours? One damaged tablet includes a sequence that appears to correspond roughly to our current era. The inscription near that interval contains a single phrase, the age of acceleration. No further explanation survives. But acceleration is the opposite of synchronization. Acceleration is imbalance. And suddenly their disappearance feels less like retreat and more like completion. Maybe they believed that after their cycle ended, a faster civilization would rise. One obsessed not with harmony, but with speed. One that would treat time not as sacred pattern, but as commodity. And maybe they understood something we still struggle to accept. That when you try to dominate time, time eventually dominates you. The final inscriptions found near the subterranean chamber are haunting in their simplicity. There is no escape from the turning. We are not masters of the hour. To resist the flow is to fracture. No apocalypse prophecy, no divine threat, just inevitability. And perhaps that is why their legacy feels so different from other ancient cultures. There is no myth of punishment, no story of wrath, no warning of gods returning in fury. There is only reminder. The pattern continues whether we acknowledge it or not. Their cities now lie silent beneath sand and stone. But twice a year, on the equinoxes, sunlight still aligned perfectly with the central chamber. The beam still touches its calculated ring. Time continues its sweep. The clock they built is still running. And here is the most unsettling thought of all. If they were right, if civilizations have natural intervals, then we are somewhere within ours. The question is not whether time will judge us. Time does not judge. It measures. The real question is this. Are we synchronized or accelerating toward imbalance? And if this ancient civilization truly understood the turning of ages, then maybe their greatest act of worship was not prayer. It was listening. And maybe the greatest mistake we can make is refusing to do the same. If you want to explore what happens next, how their knowledge may still be encoded in structures we walk past every day, and whether echoes of their philosophy survive into later cultures, stay with me, because this story is not over. What if the reason we've never found a surviving fragment of their population is because they never intended to survive in the way we define survival? Stay with me now, because this final layer changes the entire meaning of their existence. And if this resonates even slightly, follow this thought to the end, because the ending isn't about them. It's about us. As the last measurable alignment approached, the one marked by the Alchemist ring in their subterranean chamber, construction across the capital slowed. Quarry activity decreased. Agricultural terraces were harvested one final time. Record show tool production declined intentionally, not due to scarcity, not due to invasion, due to timing. In the final decades, inscriptions shift tone. Earlier texts speak of balance, measure, stewardship, but later ones speak of release. To hold beyond one's interval invites distortion. The river does not cling to the bank. There is no fear in these words, only acceptance. Archaeologists once believed ancient civilizations collapsed because they failed to adapt. But what if this one ended because it succeeded too well? What if their entire system was designed not for indefinite expansion, but for completion? Completion is a concept modern culture resists. We scale, we multiply, we extend lifespans, we expand markets, we archive endlessly, we fear endings. They rehearse them. Evidence suggests that during the final ceremonial cycle, citizens gathered one last time in the central plaza. The light shaft would have struck the final ring precisely at solar apex. Based on erosion patterns and residue analysis, fires were lit around the outer circle, not destructive fires, but controlled ritual flames. Then silence, homes left intact, grain stores sealed, astronomical records finalized. No mass migration trails have been discovered nearby. No defensive structures indicating panic. No signs of plague. It's as if they stepped out of the narrative. Some researchers propose they disperse into smaller communities, abandoning large-scale civilization to prevent imbalance. Others speculate environmental shifts force relocation. But neither theory explains the precision of their departure. Because their city was not destroyed, it was concluded. The final tablet discovered beneath the central chamber was fragmented, but enough remains to reconstruct its closing lines. The pattern does not require permanence of form. We return to the interval from which we rose. The turning continues without us. That last line is staggering. Without us, not after us, not despite us. Without us, it implies they saw themselves as temporary expressions of a larger temporal rhythm. Just as spring does not mourn when it becomes summer, they did not mourn becoming absence. This philosophy dissolved the ego at a civilizational scale. And here's the uncomfortable mirror it holds up to us. Modern society defines success as longevity and growth. We measure progress by expansion curves. GDP, population, digital storage, lifespan extension, technological acceleration. We celebrate disruption. But disruption is precisely what they feared. To them, acceleration was spiritual imbalance. And if their predictive models were accurate, if they truly calculated long-term civilizational patterns, then perhaps they saw something in the future that confirmed their choice. Because in the final carvings near the chamber's exit, one phrase repeats 3 times. When the measure fractures, the noise will rise. Noise, not war, not fire, not flood. Noise, the age of acceleration. Look around. Constant signal, endless information, infinite scrolling timelines, clocks synchronized globally to the millisecond, productivity optimized down to seconds, markets reacting in microbursts, attention fragmented into notifications. We do not align with time. We compete with it. We race deadlines. We multitask minutes. We attempt to compress years into quarters. We attempt to extend youth. We attempt to outpace aging. But no civilization has ever outrun entropy. They understood that, and instead of fighting the inevitable, they harmonized with it. Their worship was not emotional devotion. It was disciplined observation. Their temples were instruments. Their rituals were calibrations. Their morality was timing. And perhaps that is why their legacy feels strangely modern. Because in physics, time remains one of the least understood dimensions. We can measure it with atomic precision, yet we still debate its fundamental nature. Is it linear, cyclical, emergent, illusory? That civilization didn't ask what time is. They asked how to live within it correctly. And maybe that's a deeper message hidden beneath their ruins. We are not outside the turning. We are inside it. Civilizations rise, expand, peak, decline, transform, not because gods demand sacrifice, not because fate is cruel, but because cycles govern complexity. Forests regenerate after fire. Stars are born and collapse. Cells divide and die. Oceans rise and recede. Why would human systems be exempt? The most radical possibility is not that they vanished. It's that they completed their interval exactly as intended. And here is the final question, the one that lingers long after the ruins fade from view. If we discovered with certainty that civilizations have measurable lifespans, would we choose to resist that knowledge or align with it? Would we attempt to prolong dominance indefinitely? Or would we design a graceful transition? Their silence might be the most powerful statement in history. No monument screaming for remembrance. No myth threatening divine revenge. Just a clock still ticking beneath the earth, marking solstices with indifferent precision. Time does not punish. It does not reward. It continues. And maybe true wisdom was never about conquering it. Maybe it was about listening to its rhythm and knowing when your verse ends. If this perspective shifted the way you see history or the present, stay curious, stay questioning, and most of all, stay aware of the turning, because the measure is always moving. And whether we worship it or ignore it, time is still counting. Their silence might be the most powerful statement in history. No monument screaming for remembrance. No myth threatening divine revenge. Just a clock still ticking beneath the earth, marking solstices with indifferent precision. Time does not punish. It does not reward. It continues. If this changed how you see civilizations, history, and your own place in the universe, share this, comment your thoughts, and follow now to uncover more hidden truth before time runs out.